Hi everyone, I am Tali. My capstone was about the music of physical therapy. But before I begin, I'd like to thank my advisors, Mr. McAlpine, who helped me with everything from the beginning, Dr. Majeski back there, and I don't see Dr. Tracy. Did she walk in? Maybe not, but Dr. Tracy. This is Lily, and my presentation is pretty much all about her. Lily has cerebral palsy and has therefore spent many hours in physical therapy. I would know, as I worked as her shadow and her one-on-one volunteer counselor in the sleepaway camp. So just a little bit of background as to what is cerebral palsy. Cerebral palsy is a group of neurological disorders. They are non-progressive, which means they don't get worse over time. But they affect your movement, your posture, your muscle tone. So some kids have very loose, floppy muscles, whereas others, like Lily, are spastic, meaning they have very tight, tense muscles. And those can actually lead to bone deformities, joint problems, and other complications. They may also cerebral palsy may also cause motor, cognitive, and speech delays. Lily spends a lot of time in speech therapy as well. And occasionally it occurs in conjunction with behavioral, sensory, and seizure disorders. So, for example, Lily gets very frustrated and can be a little bit aggressive at times. Cerebral palsy occurs in about 2 to 2.5 of every 1,000 live births, so it is pretty common. So the purpose of my capstone was to understand challenges that physical therapists who work with these children may come across, since that's the area of focus I would like to go into. I reviewed the relevant disciplinary literature in order to construct a more comprehensive understanding as to the problem, what's out there, how it's currently dealt with, what we could do maybe a little bit differently, and combine stuff and create sort of a new understanding using my bridging strategies that will sort of help me develop a solution to some of those challenges. So very briefly, some of the problems that I came across were that the children experience stress and anxiety, both in terms of their disabilities, what they can't do, and in terms of the hours and time spent in the therapy sessions. So a lot of that anxiety is also due to their muscle spasticity, which causes pain. So I kind of imagine that to be like if you haven't been to the gym or exercised in a really long time, and then you go to reach down and touch your toes, like I'm gonna stretch, and you feel the stretch the whole back of your legs, and it's quite painful. And you think to yourself, I so don't want to do that again. I kind of imagine that as what Lily experiences every day. So she doesn't want to participate in her therapies because it hurts, it's not comfortable. And she's anticipating the pain, so she gets stressed about it. And the stress actually exacerbates the muscle spasticity. So it's sort of a circular issue. So the children aren't really motivated to participate in their therapy exercises, to do their home exercises, or to wear their braces and stuff like that. So I really used the literature review. The relevant disciplines that I personally used were physical therapy, psychology, and music. In terms of physical therapy, there was a lot more than just conductive education. There was the physiology, there was a lot of the medical staff that are involved in caring for these people who had, so nursing journals, orthopedic journals, I used those too. But conductive education I pointed out on here because it's very similar to my whole premise for my capstone, in that it uses psychology, they use education and music in addition to therapy in order to help these children to thrive. Psychology I found focused a lot on the music psychology, which helped to integrate music into my capstone, and health psychology, which is really pertinent because the whole thing was about health, how they live, how their lives and function. So why I found this to be interdisciplinary. So stress, anxiety, and pain have psychological and physiological causes and manifestations. It's really hard to sort of separate it out what causes what and what treats what. In addition, increased muscle tone, behavior, aggression, anxiety. Those are all symptoms of cerebral palsy, but they're also psychological phenomena that we see in other individuals. And finally, I found that listening to music is shown to have physiological and psychological effects on the listener. So some of the conflicts that I approached, again, this is very brief, is that physical therapy looks at cerebral palsy as a condition, right? It's a disorder. So they use a biomedical approach to treat it. So they might use kinesiotape, which will inhibit or activate muscles for better posture, to reduce pain. They'll use electrical stimulation, splinting, Botox injections, and nerve blocks to help reduce some of the muscle tension and pain involved. But they sort of stick to that whole approach. Whereas psychology treats very similar issues, stress, anxiety, heart rate, muscle tension, all the stuff that we think of, they treat with biofeedback and cognitive behavioral therapy, in which we treat the child to use their mind to control their autonomic functions. So bridging strategies that I focused on were bridging the explanation-action gap and reasoning through analogies. I found that physical therapy and psychology provided the context for me to understand the problem, why they experience this stress, what the stress does to them, the pain, the lack of motivation. It was all found in the physical therapy and psychology journals. And music really provided the solution to the problem in that it could address both the psychological and the physiological. You listen to relaxing music and you feel more relaxed and you release the muscle tension and stuff like that. Whereas reasoning through analogies, I sort of think of as like a dance. So the therapy, we don't think so much about walking, but for example, to walk, you need to step, heel, toe, lift up your knee, and then take your next step. There's different parts to each movement that we do, which we don't have to think about. They become a fluid motion, almost like a dance that could be put to music. But there's a rhythm to everything, just like the music has. So I thought music could be used to teach the therapeutic exercises in a more comprehensible way for the children. And so this is how I incorporated music into the therapy session. I decided that if you play pre-recorded music during the session, it could be used in multiple ways. The first is slow and calming music, which can be used to really relax the patient, reduce your stress. You listen to nice calming music, we all do it when we have a stressed out day, and it relieves the muscle tension, it relieves the fear, and it relaxes them to be more willing to participate. In addition, faster and fun music can be used for motivation and excitement. So Lily loves to dance to music. She dances a little bit interestingly, but she loves it nonetheless. And so I was able to convince her to wear her proper braces so that she could get up and stand and practice walking and dancing because the music was exciting and motivating to her. The tempo of the pre-recorded music is, like as I mentioned before, it's a way to teach the therapy exercises in a way that they can internalize better. So you break it down into the steps, right? My karate teacher used to go like this and go 1, 2, ready, play. And that was the beat that he would give us for the bends and thrusts that we were doing, right? And we all would follow that motion, that tempo. And I found that we could do it for the walking, for example, right? 1, 2, ready, walk, and then heel, toe, step, knee, right? The whole thing. And finally, the assistive technologies I found were very cool. This over here is the old version of the sound beam. There's a newer one. And it actually can be programmed to detect either really large movements or really, really small movements. And it produces a musical note with each movement. So that the child moves a hand, let's say, and it plays a note, and they go, oh my gosh, I did that? And they're like, wait, let me try this again. And then they keep going, and it's a motivating factor, it's fun, it's exciting, and it also is positive feedback in that every time they do something, it produces the proper note. So just to summarize very quickly, the physical therapy for children with cerebral palsy has to be interdisciplinary. They're children, they have this neurological disorder, so obviously physical therapy and the whole biomedical world plays a huge factor, but at the same time, They're individual people. We have to take their psychology into account, how it affects their physiology. By integrating those disciplines, we can sort of create that better understanding, and then using the music as the solution to address those problems, make it clear, make it easier for the kids. Using the music as an analogy to make it fun, like a dance, it's exciting. And then if we use the music, we can better motivate them, teach them, and succeed.
Not really a question, more of a comment. I remember you practiced in the IDS class. You have majorly improved your whole project, and I was very impressed with it.
Thank you so much.
There's nothing really I can say from all this comments from before that you just took them and you just made them even better.
Thank you so much.
You were talking about medications, Botox, and you didn't mention anti-seizure meds, but I wonder if that's also something they're given.
So I did see that the children who have seizures do receive anti-seizure meds because Lily doesn't have them. I didn't focus so much on it. I focused a little bit more on the muscle tension for me as a therapist. Yeah.
Where my question is going is there any research that compares the amount of medication taken when children don't use the music therapy as compared to when they do?
So I don't know, because I haven't really seen physical therapists use the music. Some have told me that they've used music, but I haven't found the literature really describing it being used, which is why I found this to be a little bit of a new idea, where I saw music therapy in terms of stroke patients, Parkinson's patients, and others. Mr. McAlpine told me about Tomeno, who's a music therapist.
Connie Tomeno.
Yeah, and I did use a lot of her research where she says it helps with a lot of neurological disorders, but I didn't find any in particular for these children.
You could do it.
I would love to. Yeah.
So I guess following that up almost, so Lee is telling us that everything written is a story, and you're telling us that every movement is a dance. Do you find that physical therapists who are not thinking musically are aware that the oral environment is playing a role, or is this kind of a loop when you're sort of talking to them or when you're reading their work, that they're just not aware that the oral environment contributes?
So it's interesting, conductive education, which I mentioned a little bit previously, their premise, they use physical therapists, occupational therapists, and teachers, and train them in their methods, and they use verbal cues for the therapies. So they taught Lily that when she's lying on her back, she should say and do shoulder, elbow, wrist in order to push herself up and sit up. Where we don't think about it, we sort of go straight up. They actually use songs and rhyme to teach them, and they actually go off Vygotsky's theory that children learn through communication, through language, communication, and based on that, they say that children can learn motor development through those verbal cues, and then they use song and rhyme to actually accomplish that. And that's sort of where I took that idea from. I don't know if I made that clear.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just sort of similar note. I'm wondering how kind of cutting edge this is, or if there's a cohort of folks who are really urging the implementation, the use of music in therapy, particularly with children and children, and if it's shaping where you want to go with your own work and career, and how you see that going forward.
So I developed my capstone off my own idea. I told Mr. McAlpine that I was walking through campus one time, I saw someone with a violin, and I was like, oh, if I had kept up violin playing, I could have totally incorporated that, and he said, go for it, just do it. So really, I had come up with the idea pretty much on my own initially. I have spoken to different physical therapists that I've worked with. One who works in the Delray School, she said she incorporated music a little bit for her younger patients, not for the older ones. And she did find it to be, soothing or effective or whatever, but she doesn't really use it so much. And in the literature, I really didn't find people who had used it before. But from my own experience, my physical therapist does. I don't know if she thinks about it, but she always has like relaxing music in the background. And so I sort of thought of it on my own and then took a lot from music therapy and just literature that I was able to find to sort of formulate, like based on music psychology, this idea. I didn't see anyone who's really doing it yet, so I kind of wanted to explore it. I couldn't do an experiment for this capstone to actually see how it would work, so I sort of had to formulate this new idea based on my research.
So I noticed in your first slide there's a picture, it was up there. Is that a picture of Lily at the piano?
That is Lily, and she is playing the piano.
Did you do any work, so a lot of your research focused on listening to music, but do you also work with her in making music, and is there any sort of therapeutic value to that?
So I'm not sure exactly. I think it's a little more in the occupational therapy, where the fingers, the typing, that fine motor. She did take piano lessons, and she plays piano with one finger, just this one. If you can see her,
Yeah.
she actually has a little
Band-aid on it.
bandage on there because she burnt her finger that day. This was in camp. She performed for the talent show. Other than the sound beam, which psychologists and I forgot what she was, the author who wrote about the sound beam, but she actually does incorporate it for children with special needs, specifically cerebral palsy, because she found that it's a way for them to make music and that they moved more and got their necessary exercise or whatever by making music that way. So I don't know if anyone's really tried to do it in terms of instruments. I know Lily would love it in terms of like the piano.
That's true. You did touch on the fact that they love the fact that their movements make music. I was thinking more of in terms of an instrument, but you're saying that's a motivational piece. It's just
So-
making sounds with your body.
The newer version of the sound beam, which I wasn't able to find a picture of, but if you want the website, I can tell you where to look it up. It's actually very cool. They have these things on the floor where you could sort of step on, set your tempo or like a drum, and then different movements. And they were literally like playing it like an instrument. So they weren't touching anything, it was in the air, sort of like the air guitar, but they were actually playing this instrument, it was awesome.
I guess, going back to your explanation or your bridging strategies, that bridging explanation gap, could you quickly just review it again?
Yeah, so I found that stress, anxiety, Lily's frustration and aggression a little bit, and muscle tension had both physiological components that were addressed in the physical therapy literature, but they also had psychological effects and causes that were addressed in psychology literature, and those kind of gave me a framework to understand what was really causing each of those challenges and how to better address them from the different perspectives. And then I found that music was a single discipline that could address both aspects.
Thank you. I think for the sake of time, we better wrap it up there. Thank you very much, Tali.
Thank you.